So today, let's dive into one of history's most infamous conspiracies. We're going to find out how a political assassination backfired so spectacularly that it ended up destroying the very thing it was meant to save, the Roman Republic. Okay, picture this. The date is March 15th, 44 BC, a day we all know as the Ides of March. We are in the heart of Rome on a day that is about to change the world forever. But we're not in the grand, open Roman Forum. No, the Senate is meeting in a place called the Curia of Pompey. It's a temporary, more secluded spot, and this detail is absolutely crucial. See, it has no direct access to the street. It's an isolated, controlled environment. Really, the perfect place for an ambush. So, where's Caesar's most powerful and loyal ally, Mark Antony? Well, he's been conveniently pulled aside for a chat right outside the entrance. The thing is, Antony was a fearsome soldier. He was probably the one guy who could have physically stopped what was about to happen. The conspirators knew this. They had to get him out of the picture. And so, the most powerful man in the world walks into the chamber. He takes his seat on his golden ceremonial chair, surrounded by senators, men he believes are his colleagues, his friends. He is utterly and completely alone. It just seems impossible, right? How did the undisputed ruler of Rome, a certified military genius, end up so exposed, so incredibly vulnerable? Well, to answer that, we've got to rewind the clock and look at how he got there in the first place. You see, to really understand Caesar's death, we have to understand his life, his absolutely incredible rise to power, and why that very power is what put a target on his back. I mean, just look at this timeline. His rise was nothing short of meteoric. In just 15 years, he goes from being elected to Rome's top job to conquering all of Gaul, which made him fabulously wealthy and gave him an army loyal only to him. Then in 49 BC, he makes that fateful decision to cross the Rubicon, plunging the Republic into civil war. By 45 BC, he's won, and just a month before his death, he's named dictator for life. He had become larger than Rome itself. And he wasn't exactly subtle about it. In a republic that absolutely despised the idea of kings, Caesar started acting like one. He wore royal purple, he put up statues of himself, he even renamed a month after himself. Yep, that's where we get July. And that golden chair he sat on in the Senate? Come on, it was a throne in all but name. He was centralizing power, and for the Roman aristocracy, this was an existential threat. All of this blatant display of power, it terrified the Roman aristocracy. And you know what that kind of fear leads to? It leads to conspiracies. A secret group of senators began to plot, not just to kill a man, but in their minds, to save the very soul of the Republic. Now, as this chart shows, the conspirators weren't all cut from the same cloth. You had former enemies that Caesar had foolishly pardoned. You had allies who were disappointed because they felt they hadn't been rewarded enough. And then you had this big group of idealists and old-school aristocrats who just saw their power and their way of life slipping away. It was a coalition of the resentful, all united by a common fear. And these guys were methodical. They considered their options carefully. An attack in the street? Nah, too public. His friends could jump in. What about at a gladiator show? Too chaotic. Push him from a bridge? The outcome was just too uncertain. No, a Senate meeting. That was perfect. It was a controlled environment, nobody inside would be armed, and it could all be done subtly, away from the prying eyes of the public. Okay, so that brings us right back to the Ides of March. Now that we understand the why and the who, we can see how every single piece of this deadly puzzle just falls right into place on the day of the assassination. It is honestly unbelievable how many warnings Caesar just ignored that day. A fortune teller had literally told him to beware the Ides of March. His own wife, Calpurnia, woke up from a terrifying nightmare where she was holding his murdered body. His personal priests performed sacrifices that all came back with bad omens. He was even handed a scroll on his way to the Senate that supposedly detailed the entire plot, but he just never got around to reading it. So why on earth did he go? He had actually decided to cancel the meeting. But then, a man he trusted completely, Decimus Brutus, a man who was not only a key conspirator, but was also named second in Caesar's will. He came and played on his ego. As Decimus put it, how cowardly would it look if the great Caesar hid at home because of some superstitions? Well, that was enough. Caesar's pride led him straight into the trap. The final preparations were deceptively simple. The assassins snuck their daggers into the curia, hidden inside these little wooden boxes, the kind they'd normally use to carry writing tablets and a stylus. The very instruments of lawmaking were about to become instruments of murder. The attack begins under the guise of politics. A senator named Tullius Cimber approaches Caesar with a plea. As others crowd around, Cimber grabs Caesar's toga and pulls it down off his shoulders. That's the signal. From behind, another senator, Casca, strikes the first blow. Caesar, totally shocked, actually fights back, stabbing Casca with his writing stylus, the pen against the sword. But it's hopeless. He's completely overwhelmed in a frenzy of blades. An autopsy later would find that he had been stabbed 23 times. And here is the most profound, most bitterly ironic twist in the whole story. Caesar collapses and bleeds to death at the base of a statue of Pompey the Great, his arch-rival, the man he defeated to win that civil war. It was a statue Caesar himself had refused to tear down, a final, mocking witness to his downfall. The conspirators, they thought they were heroes. They truly believed they had just saved the Republic, but in reality, they had just signed its death warrant. See, Caesar's death didn't restore the old order. It just created a massive power vacuum, as you can see here. The conspirators had no plan for what came next. Meanwhile, Caesar's allies, like his adopted son Octavian and Mark Antony, immediately moved to get revenge. And the Roman people? They were left confused and leaderless, which plunged the Republic into another, even more brutal civil war. The tragic irony here is just laid bare when you look at it like this. Their goal was to preserve the Republic. Their actions triggered a civil war that completely destroyed it. They wanted to end one-man rule. Instead, they paved the way for an emperor. They hoped to restore the Senate's power, but all they did was enable the rise of Caesar's heir, who would sideline the Senate for good. So ultimately, Caesar's fatal flaw was what one historian calls his inconsiderate authoritarianism. He was just too open, too brazen about his power, and, believe it or not, far too merciful with his enemies. His successor, Octavian, he learned from all these mistakes. He would build an empire, all right, but he would do it with subtlety and ruthlessness, hiding his absolute power behind what you could call a Republican mask. Which leaves us with the central question of this entire drama, a question historians are still debating today. Did the daggers that killed Julius Caesar save the Republic, or were they the very instruments that signed its death warrant?